Are you up for us going like way back to tell your story? Because I just think it so helps understand just how God's wired you and the passion you live for and the presence and zest of life you've got. And so take us way back to those early years of your life, and then ultimately what brought you to Canada.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm from a country called Rwanda. It's a tiny little country in East Africa. And I was born in France while my parents were going to seminary there, and I'm the fourth out of five children. My parents are both Anglican ministers, and they went to school in Europe. Then they moved back to Rwanda, where they were born, where they're from, and we lived there for the first, few years of my life. And in 1994, there was a genocide in Rwanda that claimed the lives of almost 1 million people in a matter of about 3 months. And in that war, in that genocide, about 80% of my family members were killed, including my dad. And then we were refugees for a couple of years. We went to Tanzania after that. And then after Tanzania, we settled for several months in Kenya. And the whole time, my mom was trying to get us to immigrate to a Western country, somewhere in Europe, preferably. And because we had friends in Europe, my parents both having gone to seminary in France and England, we were trying to immigrate to England. But at the time, there was, in the mid-90s, there was a lot of unrest in Africa. It wasn't just Rwanda. A lot of countries were experiencing unrest, and there's a lot of civil war and strife going on. So kind of like it was in 2011 and 2012, the European countries were inundated with refugees. And so when we were trying to immigrate from Kenya and find a safe place to call home, they weren't really accepting any more new refugees, and it was difficult to get out of Africa. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of stuck in Nairobi, capital city of Kenya, and trying to find a way out. And my mom really did not know what to do. And my mom's life and the life of her children, we were actually still in danger because the people who sought my parents' lives in Rwanda were looking for us in Kenya as well. So unbeknownst to us, my mom didn't say much about this to her children, obviously. But unbeknownst to us, it was a pressurous situation. But by the amazing grace of God, and that's the only way that I can really frame this next part, there was a small group of old ladies in downtown Winnipeg at St. Matthew's Anglican Church that had a refugee committee, and they were just looking for refugees to help. And so the story of my family, because my mom and dad were Anglican ministers, that our story had kind of circulated, that there was this single mom who had lost her husband in the genocide, had 5 kids, and was looking for a safe place to land. That story circulated around the Anglican circles. This small group of ladies at St. Matthew's Anglican Church in Winnipeg heard about us and decided they were going to sponsor us, which is amazing. A single mom with 5 kids to sponsor us means that we are their responsibility once we arrive in Canada. And so they did that. It was crazy. Every time I tell the story now more than I've done before. And when I look back at it, I still can't believe it. It's literally shocking that they did that. But they did that. And then in 1996, October, we landed in Winnipeg. And my older siblings had experienced winter before because we were living in England and France. But I was just a kid when we left Europe. So it was really my first experience with winter and snow. And then that spring, we had what was called the flood of the century here in Manitoba. So that was my introduction to Canada. And I so many like refugee stories, like first experiences running through my head right now. I'm trying to skip them all. But it was an amazing experience. And that's how we landed in Canada. And then we grew up in Winnipeg.
Oh, bro. Well, I'm so thankful that you'd share that story. I didn't know those elements of your story when we first chatted last week. And, you're so kind to tell it. And it just seems so significant. And it almost feels like just to brush past just the miraculous nature of it, but also just how tragic and profound it is. And it's almost like just so aware of the conversation around race happening around us right now. And then for you to have experienced in your childhood just such extreme, pronounced racial injustice. And I just wonder how that backdrop to your life is just informed the way in which you're leading a church, the way in which you're preaching Jesus and the way in which you're making disciples. I just wonder, like, as you try to connect the dots, like obviously it informs everything, but as you look at that story that you just shared and you're living that out, just curious how that's really defined and set apart kind of the ministry work that you feel called to even today.
That's a great question. And I think after my dad was killed in the genocide, the next, so I was about 6 years old at the time, the next 14, 15 years of my life was that pain just taking root in a very strong way and then really beginning to express itself in what I think were potentially very destructive mindsets. And then the next 7 or 8 or 9 years after that was God began to bring healing into my life. And then I would say the last year or two, and I turned 30 a couple of years ago, and that was a big moment for me. So I would say since then, I feel like life is different, and I'm now beginning to walk out the benefit of that healing to other people. So I can even say the first bunch of years in ministry, I was ministering, but also healing and trying to process that. And then my mom passed away in 2014 from stomach cancer. And so that actually was a very difficult time. It unleashed all the things that I'd held at bay since I was a kid. And it was horrible. But looking back, I can see that God was saying, you know what, let's take this opportunity to take it all out. Let's not leave anything under the surface. Let's make sure that, when you're 35, 36, it doesn't all erupt. Let's just take this very painful time in your life to lay it all out there so we can deal with all of it. And then, you can enter your 30s from a place of much greater health.
One of the things that you explained to me, like, just how many, just the lives that you and your siblings are living, like, just incredible. Like, you're not the only one in ministry, and it just seems like your siblings are just making such an impact where they are. And I just want to just take a moment and just honor your parents and just the legacy that they have in you. And, Canada and the world are reaping the benefits of their investment, their sacrifice. They obviously studying theology and then leading a church, had a dream about making disciples in Rwanda and then around the world, and just to see that legacy lived out. And it just gives me great hope that there'll be some sort of perspective from eternity where there'll be some sort of just seeing the whole picture and all the tragedy and all the brokenness and the way that God is just doing this redemptive work. Just amazing. Awesome. So just want to honor your parents.
Thank you. Thank you very much.